for Quark Expeditions, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm pretty excited about expedition in general. And the trip that we're looking at is the Arctic Saga, which travels up from the top of the UK from Aberdeen and finishes up in Spitsbergen in Longyearbyen, which is always nice to hear someone else pronounce it because it's a long word, and sometimes people are terrified of it. Before I jump into that trip, I just wanted to give some background about Quark, and just to give a brief sort of understanding of who we are and what we do. This is me. I've been in the travel industry for 25 years. I do fancy myself as a polar model. You can try and replicate that image if you want, if you jump on one of our trips, but that's on one of our Zodiacs, which we have 20 of on the Ultramarine vessel that we'll be talking about today. But yeah, I've been down to the Antarctic and the Arctic. I've got another trip at the end of this month up to the Canadian High Arctic, which I'm pretty excited about. But this is what I talk about day to day, and I'm passionate about it. And I think if you've ever spoken to anyone from sort of expedition companies or adventure companies, they're usually a little bit strange, but very, very passionate about getting off the beaten track and doing some interesting things. When we talk about things at Quark, we're really, really, really focused on making sure that people understand that we are an expedition company. We are not a cruise line. We're under 200 guests on all of our ships. We've got 3 different vessels at the moment, but it's an expedition, and that in the sense of it is scientific, it is learning, it is off the beaten track, it's a little bit rugged with a lot of luxury, but I find anyone who gets on an expedition vessel instantly becomes a little bit of a nerd. You're in remote environments full of interesting and sort of unseen in geographical formations and wildlife, and people instantly want to know everything they can about it. And that's where our expedition guides come into their own and really explain everything in detail. We have lectures every night, and all of a sudden you find yourself signing up to go and listen to a lecture on glacial movement, which if I asked you this evening to come along to, you might say, I'm good. But when you're on a ship, all of a sudden everything around you is fascinating and you want to hear about it. And that's what brings it alive. So expedition, not cruise. This is just a short video about Quark and being on one of our ships. There's a lot of really beautiful footage in there from the Arctic region. You can obviously see there is no shuffleboard. Not that there's anything wrong with shuffleboard, but we just don't do it. We've got so many other things to do. So if you look at Quark, we've been around since 1991. We took the first group of travelers to the North Pole. Customers. There's been people traveling to the North Pole for a very long time. We did the first circumnavigation of Antarctica. We discovered the most northerly emperor penguin rookery in Antarctica. It's on the Weddell Sea side of the Antarctic Peninsula, and it is a huge rookery, and it was of great significance. The BBC ended up going down and filming a whole documentary on that. The vessel that we're talking about, we built in 2019, and it's the Ultramarine, and it is purpose-built from the ground up for expedition. And one of the exciting things we brought out a couple of years ago is Tundra to Table, where we sort of lean into the Inuit culture in the Arctic, where there has been 5,000 years of continuous inhabitation of the Arctic region by the Inuit people. And in that time, they may have gotten hungry. So there's a lot of things they've been eating that are unique to that part of the planet. And we've sort of brought that alive in a little bit of a fine dining experience with some Inuit chefs on board. So that's quite an exciting thing for us. So we're always trying to amplify the experience and bring more of the outside in and show you everything that we can, basically. What we do really do focus on is getting you off the beaten track and as far away from the real world as possible. I really like this image because we'll take you somewhere like Greenland, which is the end of the world, and then we'll throw you on a helicopter and take you to the edge of the end of the world and put you in a tent for the night. It is a paid adventure activity, but a heli camp in the wilds of Greenland is pretty exciting, and that's what we're really passionate about: is creating those experiences that you just don't necessarily get day to day. And the people who make that trip for us are our expedition guides. So they are the experts that I was talking about before. We've got some minor celebrities within our company. We've got customers who will ring up and say, I don't want to go on a trip unless Dave, who's in the bottom right, is on that trip, because they bring it alive. We have the longest tenure of expedition guides. These are the people who will be riding around in the Zodiacs with you. They're pretty much all marine biologists, glaciologists, geologists. They're all scientists. They're probably doing some form of study while working on the ship as well. And they bring it to life. They're the ones who are going to find the bird life. They're going to keep you alive, which is important as well. But we also have the highest ratio or the lowest ratio of guests to expedition guides in the industry. So whereas some of our competitors or the industry average would be 10 to 12 guests per expedition guide, we're looking at 6 guests per expedition guide. And I think that really makes a difference. If you've traveled to the other end of the planet and you've got all this time in Zodiacs and walking around on land with these guys, you want to have the best possible experience you can. So we've doubled up on how many people are there to really bring that experience to life. And it is fantastic. And this is the vessel we're talking about, the Ultramarine. It takes 199 guests, and it's fantastically beautiful. And it does have 2 helicopters on board, and everybody on our trips gets a flight seeing experience to experience what's just over the horizon. You know, you are at the end of the earth, the scenery is epic, and then to be able to jump on a chopper and fly over and see what else is there, or as that video suggested, flying over a glacier or landing on a polar ice sheet is an incredible experience. So we have those sorts of options available. We do have 3 vessels. They are all under 200, and we do focus purely on the Antarctic and the Arctic. That's all we do, and that's all we ever have done. And that sort of gives us that moniker of we are the leaders in polar expedition, because we've never dabbled in anything else, and we are experts in that field. We have the highest number of add-on adventure activities, but in terms of if you're on a voyage, what's included, we'll let you jump into the sea for free, which is always a great option if you want to do the polar plunge. The Zodiac cruising, that's twice a day. We'll be out on Zodiacs cruising around. Sometimes people think that that's just kind of keeping you busy until you get to land. And for me, in polar exploration, the Zodiac cruises are the most incredible thing. When you're at the water's edge, right up close to a glacier, and seeing that it's 10, 15 stories high, it's just incredible to be there. And cruising around icebergs or having marine life diving under your Zodiac and bouncing out of the water, it is fantastic. It is chilly, but we provide you with an excellent jacket for that as well. We visit a whole bunch of communities, and this itinerary that we are featuring with Cruise Express does visit quite a few towns, and that's obviously included in it. It is as active as you want it to be, but there are some great opportunities to stretch your legs, get your steps up, and walk in some really amazing environments. And we do have photography guides on board. So if you are passionate about photography, there are people there to give you tips and hints. That's not an image saying we'll let you take pictures with your own camera for free. We will help you develop your photography and make it better. And I have seen some incredible testimonials of people who've come on board, and the quality of their photography has improved exponentially, just with tips and hints from people who are experts, or people who are experts at photography in stark environments like the Arctic or the Antarctic. And then, as I alluded to before, there are lectures in the evenings, and they are fascinating. They're immersive. You are surrounded by this stuff, and you are wanting to learn about it. So the expedition guides really bring it to life and make it fantastic. I did say before, and it is a true story, we do have the highest number of paid adventure options of any expedition provider out there. We've got kayaking options. We do prefer guests have seen a kayak before they turn up to the Arctic or the Antarctic and jump in a kayak. It's good if they've actually paddled around before. It is a busy experience. You are out on the water for a couple of hours in very cold conditions, so you'd like to be passionate about it. But we do offer a paddle day for people who are interested, but they don't necessarily want to be kayaking every single time they go out. As I sort of mentioned, there is things like heli camping, that tundra to table on the top right there. We do stand-up paddle boarding, we do heli landings, heli mountain biking, all sorts of interesting things. And those paid adventure options, like we do have trips all around in the polar regions, are specific to different trips. So if we're in trips that purely focus on Spitsbergen, we don't use the helicopters because the polar bears really dislike them. And things like stand-up paddleboarding, I don't think we do them in the Arctic as well because polar bears are carnivores. I'll leave it at that. So yeah, every trip we have will have specific paid adventure options and included options. But it is an experience. We want you to love the vessel, but we want you to love being off the vessel just as much. When we talk about the Arctic, there are three distinct regions. There's Svalbard or Spitsbergen. It's the archipelago, and it is polar bear central, I like to call it. Greenland is just majestic, beautiful, incredible scenery. It's the Norwegian fjords basically amplified on steroids, basically. The mountains are taller, the fjords are wider, the water is deeper. And everything is grander. And then we go across to the Canadian Arctic, which is on the left of the screen here as well. And that has all of those things, but it also has a whole bunch of explorer history, the history of 400 years of failed exploration, trying to get from Europe to Asia across the top of the planet. So shipwrecks, explorers, wildlife, scenery, everything you can think of. The Arctic has an awful lot of it, but it is spread out over different regions, and it does sometimes make it a little confusing about where you want to go. But if your focus is polar bears, then and anything that spends some time up in Svalbard, Spitsbergen, on the right-hand side of the screen there is what you want to be doing. The trip that we're focusing on is the Arctic Saga. It leaves from Aberdeen and carries up through the Faroes, the Fair Isle, Jan Mayen, and then finishes up in Spitsbergen, has a couple of days in the bottom southwest corner of that archipelago. So just sort of, here's a video just to give you an idea of Arctic travel. And I think this is Acacia, who is actually no longer working with us because she's a full-time National Geographic
You come to the Arctic to experience solitude,
sorry.
To have the direct sensory experience of your surroundings, to disconnect from technology and crowds and the speed of everyday life. You come here for the remoteness.
Yeah, it's a real surprise. Oh my goodness. The ecstasy.
You come to the Arctic to encounter it directly. You keep scanning the horizon for movement, for life. You look closer. You begin to experience the vastness of your surroundings and how small you are in relation to the forces at work here.
I just love polar bears. They are amazing. I've watched a polar bear swim alongside the vessel and blowing bubbles out of its nose, and I don't think I'll ever forget that image as long as I live. So there's some amazing stuff up there. It was a different video because I've been looking at them all morning. But yeah, one of our expedition guides was an incredible photographer, was a photographic guide, and she is now a full-time Nat Geo photographer. So the quality of staff on board, the quality of scientific research is absolutely off the charts. So I do harp on about it a bit, but I do think that those expedition guides truly make the trip. If you just had the scenery, to be amazing, but with them bringing it to life with so much information is amazing. So on this trip that we're talking about, we take off from Aberdeen, as I said, and we head up through Fair Isle. It is the UK's most remote inhabited island, and it's covered in sea cliffs and sea stacks, and it's a bit of a time capsule of days gone past. They've still got bright red phone booths from 1935 on the island and things like that. So we visit some cool communities and sort of experience life in that sort of Orkney region where you sort of, I mean, Scotland's pretty cold and remote at the top there, and then you're further off the coast. And then we head up to the Faroe Islands and we spend 2 days there. That's about 18 different islands. And it's governed by Denmark, but it has historic ties to the Vikings. Most people who live there are descendants of the Vikings. There's also some history of Irish monks who wanted to get further away for some peace and quiet around about 800 AD as well. So there's a lot of fjords and inlets and incredible dramatic cliffs. The Arctic is a bird lover's paradise. So particularly if you like seabirds, it is amazing. So what I like about this trip is it leaves from Scotland, which is a fun place to go, especially if you like whiskey. And we take in some places that people just never really visit. Like the Fair Isle and the Faroes are very remote, and the scenery is rugged, and the people are rugged, and it's fantastic. In the Faroes, we also spent a day visiting the capital, which was the Viking capital of the world. Well, I mean, it was their, government sort of capital, if you call it a government, back in the 800s. And there's also some amazing eating experiences up there as well. I have a staff member who went up and was offered, it's a Michelin-starred restaurant, but they were serving up whale and fermented lamb and all sorts of really weird and interesting things. So there's some great cultural experiences that you can get there as well. And I think sometimes people assume that if you're going to these remote places, there is no cultural aspect to it. But you'd find that in Antarctica because people do not live there. But up in the Arctic, there's all this history and people coming and going, and it's really interesting. My favorite bird on the top right there, puffins, they're just amazing and beautiful and fascinating. If you don't know anything about them, please Google them. There's some great images of them holding like 6 or 7 fish in their mouth. But once we travel on, we spend a couple of days cruising north to Jan Mayen, and it's an amazing island. It's about 450 kilometers to the east of Greenland, so it's really remote. It's way up in the Arctic Circle, cold, amazing. It's, in the summertime, it's covered in moss and green grass, and it's got black, like lava sand, and it's got a volcano in the middle, and it's got glaciers all around it, and it's just incredible. And with the bird life, there's chances of maybe visiting and seeing a polar bear here or there. It has a population of about 18 people year round, so it's really inhabited. But it's just another one of those remote, people don't get here unless they really work for it sort of destinations. And I think you're rewarded with incredible scenery and wildlife, and a unique experience. And I think if you've taken a European holiday in the last 10 years, you'll find that there are an awful lot of places that are beautiful, but absolutely swarming with humans. The Arctic is empty and the vastness is great. And I think that's what is something that I'm really, really passionate about. There is polar bear research stations up in that direction. And there is a whole lot of whaling history, which is kind of gross, but also kind of fascinating to see how things were done and why it was so profitable and why people got into it. It's sort of got hints of that gold rush history as well, people racing to go and make their fortunes. And then from Jan Mayen, we spend a couple of days cruising up, and then we end up in Spitsbergen, which is the wildlife capital of the Arctic. It is polar bear central, as I said. It's got the highest concentration of polar bears up there, but it's not just that. It is all of that bird life. It is incredible glaciers, like right up, just crashing into the sea, beautiful mountain ranges. Spitsbergen, Svalbard, however you want to call them, is an amazing place. It's the home of the World Seed Bank, where they've got a sample of every seed on the planet, basically stored up there in case something happens, buried deep underground in the ice. Really fascinating place with incredible scenery, and most people are headed there just basically to see a polar bear or two. And that is, if that's your focus, then Svalbard is where you want to be, basically. So that's pretty much the trip. It is a mixture of culture, scenery, a bit of history in the past, and that mixture of all these different sort of seafaring peoples who have come backwards and forwards and stopped on different islands throughout history. But then like the wildlife sells itself and the scenery sells itself. So, I mean, if you saw in some of those videos, cruising around in the Zodiacs and making your way between the ice and seeing the bird life and the sea life all around you really makes it amazing. This is what we've been doing for 35 years. We are experts in our field, and we will keep you alive, which I think is important because the water is freezing cold. We will treat you to an incredibly beautiful vessel that is perfectly designed for this kind of travel. The food's fantastic. The expedition guides make the trip what it is. And we are the experts, so we will make you see the most amazing things. I cannot guarantee that we'll get a polar bear to wave at you, but I do love that image because I just think it's fantastic. And that's pretty much it. I think I can stop there and give you back some of your day, basically. So thank you very much for listening.
Thanks,
And
Chris.
if there are any questions, yeah.
Yeah. I guess, is there a better time to go than at other times of the year? Like, what would be the peak season you'd recommend?
Look, there is a belief, and it is sometimes substantiated and sometimes not, that the earlier in the season there is a better chance of seeing polar bears, especially up around Spitsbergen. And that belief is around the fact that early in the season the ice hasn't broken up as much because it's still just the very start of summer, and the more ice, the more the polar bears get around and walk around and go fishing, basically. This trip was sort of selected for that, also because it had that cultural aspect, and it left from somewhere interesting in northern Scotland. But yeah, it's basically the very first trip into the season in Spitsbergen. So by a numbers game, there are better odds of seeing polar bears on this trip than perhaps, say, in August or something like that, where they have retreated because the ice has broken up a lot more.
Right. Okay. All right. Terrific. Thank you. I think polar bears win the day.
Amazing. So yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. If anyone has any questions at all, please feel free to send them through to us. We'll make this video available as well. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.